as the government is debasing the currency, they're creating the same existential crisis for themselves as they are for the marketplace. Their cost of operating is going up at a faster rate than their ability to increase their revenue. So if the government's cost of operating is going up at 10%, but they can only increase their revenue by 10%, they have a target that's moving further away from them. And the solution to that is a monetary instrument that appreciates when other entities or other individuals or entities or nations upload their economic energy into that network. So yeah, and I went through a little bit of a period of time, and it hit me really, really hard after I came back from Pacific Bitcoin last year. So I had 100% Bitcoin allocation, hardcore Bitcoin maximalist. I had been running around for the last couple of years now in Humboldt County, talking about Bitcoin nonstop, yelling at the same 20 fucking people all day long about how big of a deal this is. And come time for Pacific Bitcoin, I went to my wife and I'm like, look, I got to go to this conference. Like, I need to meet some other Bitcoiners. Like, I'm kind of going crazy. Like, I need to meet some people.
Yeah.
And I was talking with Matt Cratter, and he said something that really hit me hard. He's like, Bitcoin's the first money humanity's ever had. We had a commodity money. We've had, currencies issued by nation states. And thinking about that, it really, I thought about it long and hard. And I got home maybe a week later. I was sitting in the sauna and I'm thinking about the banking bloodlines. And I'm thinking like, oh my gosh. And I just got hit with this tsunami of fear. Like, I could be in a position of jeopardy. I'm listening, I got some of Eric Kayson's rants rattling around in my head about how we're going to live in camps. And I'm just like, I don't know if that's the case. Right. And like, what do I do? And so Matt Cratter had told me, we were chatting. It was a 2-day event, and I bought a VIP ticket because I wanted to increase my exposure to a lot of these people that are like some of my best friends that I have one-sided relationships with. They don't know I exist, but they have a tremendous impact on me, right?
Well, they do now.
They do now, yeah. And so we're talking. I'm talking to Cratter, and I'm talking to a couple TradFi guys that our MicroStrategy shareholders. They were, talking about how they were on some of the Zoom calls where Saylor is, essentially orange pilling the FabSpeed board. And I was telling them my story with cannabis and how, I sold my farm and I'm doing consulting services and I live in a rental. And like, I was planning on buying a house and I pivoted that strategy. I'm going to keep all my money in Bitcoin and whatever. And so anyways, I'm telling him my story. The next day he came to me and pulled me aside and was like, look, your story is really impactful and the way that you tell it is unique. And I think people need to hear it. Like, you should be making content. And, people have been telling me that for a long time. I couldn't wrap my mind around that for the life of me. I've lived a very quiet life. The whole game really is to not draw attention to yourself. Although I have been compliant in the state of California, there's a little bit of a dynamic within cannabis where if you get caught producing cannabis, at least pre-licensure, under the 215 model, I had a 501c3, a bunch of qualified patient members. I'm paying taxes. I got an accountant. I got a corporate attorney. I got a criminal defense attorney. Like I'm not a big risk taker for somebody who's producing a federally illegal product. Lost my train of thought. Yeah. So anyways, I just, I'm rather introverted and kind of lived this quiet life. So I just couldn't, I just like, nobody gives a fuck what I have to say. Like, I don't, how am I going to do that? And I'm really busy and I don't know how to edit videos. And there's all of these epic educators and content creators and personalities within the space supporting the network. And like, anyways, his comment to me, really hit hard. And so I really thought about it really long and hard. I probably spent a month after coming back from Pacific Bitcoin. And I'm thinking about Jason Lowry's work. I'm thinking about what's are the ETFs going to get approved? Like, is this thing a threat? How does the system work? And like, it was kind of like when I owned my farm, I had this huge incentive to understand how the economy worked and the money system worked and how the property of my value the value of my property was being affected by that. It was a similar thing where now I had this huge incentive to figure out, like, am I in a position of jeopardy? Like, it's like playing chess. Like, how could this possibly play out in negative ways? And the more and more I thought about it through reason and logic, the more and more that I started to develop and adopt the optimistic perspective. And I do truly see it as a solution. I think that we might run into some sticking points. I think that you might have some Elizabeth Warrens and some individuals that are like going to say a bunch of things that are bad for Bitcoin. And maybe there's like temporary measures that are slow the rate of adoption and demonetization and the movement into the new world. But as far as I can tell, it's absolutely inevitable. And whether this takes 10 years or 100 years or 1,000 years, we live in the most important, special time in all of known history. And I think about all of the human ancestors that came before us. If I went to one of my ancestors, my great, 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 great grandfather, and I was like, look, I got this inviolable, undebasable, unconfiscatable, unfuckwithable monetary instrument, and I'm scared, he'd fucking slap me. He would be like, you're ridiculous. People since the beginning of time have been getting killed and had their stuff taken from you and from us. And you're going to tell me you have something that can't be taken from you and you're scared? Like, that's crazy, right? And so
it's true,
and I do have a little bit of an understanding how the corporate world works due to the fact that I had to found and fund and start a corporation in order to get licensed by the state of California. So I do understand a little bit of the things, maybe more so than your average American does, and at least how corporate America works and how Wall Street works. And just from simple, appreciation rates and equity, from an equity perspective, the assets collateralizing the debt are defective. They're leaking energy. Mm-hmm. So if the system has to continue to debase to keep the system solvent, if you can put an asset on the balance sheet or collateralize with the debt with an asset that's not bleeding energy, then the debasement required to keep the system solvent has to decrease. And so in some sense, I don't think Bitcoin's a threat to the dollar. I think it's a solution for the dollar. I think Bitcoin is both fixing the dollar at the same time that it's replacing the dollar because of its thermodynamic properties, because it's supreme collateral. And we live in a time where the government has to come up with more ways to inject liquidity into the marketplace to keep the system solvent, to prop asset prices up. Bitcoin is the best vector to do so. That, and from the perspective of 6102, I've thought a lot about this, and and case and talking about camps and whatever. And I'm like, okay, so if they can't steal the Bitcoin, right? How do they get the Bitcoin? Well, if they lend money into existence as debt against Bitcoin, then Bitcoin is going to hit the balance sheet of central banks. And also, you could say, well, fuck those guys. They're a bunch of shitbags. They've caused all these problems for our civilization. And whether there's nefarious intent or not, I don't like to focus on that because I don't think it's a productive thought thread. I think that by borrowing against Bitcoin, like Saylor is doing, he's doing it indirectly. He's borrowing against his shares that are backed by Bitcoin. I don't think that that's a speculative attack on the dollar. I think that that's giving up a portion of your inviolable, non-debasable property in order to stabilize the system. And I look at that as a act of actually helping to bring stabilization, solvency, sanity, whatever into the system. And it's like being a quintillionaire, but it's ethical. Because if you're borrowing against your real estate and you're buying more real estate, you're contributing to homelessness. If you're hoarding houses, where you have abundance in money, you create scarcity in everything else. Where you have scarcity in money, you create abundance in everything else. And in this case, the money is invisible, and the money incentivizes a more efficient production of electricity, energy, right? And so if you're hoarding this invisible monetary instrument, you're pulling that economic energy out of the network, strengthening. Well, you're not taking it out of the network. You're taking the units out of the network and you're hoarding them, strengthening the value in the marketplace of the existing units. So it's ethical in all of its ways. And so, I mean, that's the long and short of it, but that's And I also do think from a more spiritual and metaphysical perspective, I think we live in a vibrational universe, and I believe that we're all affecting and creating our own reality. And I think that our vibratory state is being mirrored to us in the world around us. And so I think that it's prudent for us to figure out how to develop a perspective of positivity, gratitude, and love and optimism. And as a result, and if you meet the world with that vibratory state, the world is going to reflect that back to you. And so I love that. One of the things that's so beautiful about Bitcoin is instead of hopium, it's fucking math. It's like, yo, it's true. I'm positive and I'm optimistic and I believe in love and abundance and freedom and fairness and all these things. And actually, I can really embody that vibratory state, that state of being, that feeling because of this monetary protocol predicated on physics and math. And so it's not delusional, you know. And pre-Bitcoin, I used to really struggle with like trying to tap into a truly optimistic, positive mindset constantly. I would get sucked into this negativity or this like, you know, depression in some ways where it's like, oh gosh, I used to think that like I would have rather lived like a couple hundred years ago. Like, oh, that was a better time to live. Like, this is a fucking mess. How are we going to deal with all of this? And now, because of my understanding or beliefs about Bitcoin, I feel like I live in the best time in all of human history. And so, you know, I think that, I mean, that's a long-winded answer there, but that's essentially all of it in a nutshell.
So you've heard Bitcoin is the new gold rush by now. As world leaders on all sides have endorsed it as the future of money, and now you're looking to get started, we'll show you how. It's actually easier than you think. First, go to your nearest ByteFederal ATM and turn your cash to coin. ByteFederal has over 1,200 locations around the country with the highest daily limits. Go to our website, ByteFederal.com, to find the nearest ATM to you. Log in to any wallet, then create an account, deposit your US cash, and instantly convert it to Bitcoin. That's it. We are the only US manufacturer and operator in the Bitcoin ATM industry, and our US-based live customer service is second to none. Go on, give it a whirl, and don't get left behind. Click the link below.